the reason for the demise of the piano as not so much from its evolutionary base in Italy, Tuscany, under the Medicis, the perpetrators of the power of money.
And it is so as his voice is slim, as voices from the grave.
Equations by the great Adam Smith must mark in some way the purgatory sustained by such composers as, for instance, Dr. John Bull, whose life as a self-imposed exile was meaning in some that he was, to some extent, having to exceed in those musical priorities, or exceed away from those musical priorities which had plagued him, in which life was his difficulty throughout the reign much of Queen Elizabeth I. It is not surprising, is it, that, for instance, the demise, for instance, not only of the Virginal, and I'm not referring to Queen Elizabeth I, I am referring to the musical instruments here. It is not surprising, is it, therefore, what I was going to say, it is not surprising that the Queen was, in fact, to some extent, in one sense, a lover of the keyboard and a lover of the purveyors of it. And indeed, those people who, for instance, were inscribed or ascribed to the, shall we say, the prioritization of power, in that being, for instance, the first principal of Gresham College, London. But John Bull, when Queen Elizabeth I died, had certainly to disappear abroad. Was it to Antwerp? where he took up a role as organist, that such as things like the Fitzwilliam Virginal suite, which was in fact some or unrepeatable by modern standards equation to how to play the piano, because in fact the piano had not been invented until Bartolomeo Cristofori in 1701 approximately. 1701 approximately. his last years in exile in Antwerp. There was much lost in England.
Love is a many splendid thing. It's the hateful love that only grows in the early spring. Love is nature's way of giving love to living. The golden crown that makes a man a king. All the land will begin in your morning wind to love is here and the world stood still. Then your fingers caught my silent heart and poured it down to sleep. Yes, true love, a many splendid things.
By the reign of the declining Stuart dynasty, which subsequent to Elizabeth I's reign ending in 1603, produced such monarch as King James I of England and VI of Scotland, in that Catholic tradition, the dreaded Catholic tradition, which was going to put at risk those items of the Church which had, shall we say, aspired in some regarding music. But you must remember, mustn't you, that this is some 156 years, that the Queen's last 3 years was 156 years before the birth even of W.A. Mozart, young Wolfgang Amadeus. You wonder why, or do you, that Italy could not hang on to the piano? But you don't have to wonder very long when you look, for instance, and understand why the decline of the music even later of Mozart was, after his death in 1791, going to be more the dictates of the individual soloist. concertos was certainly, shall I say, heralded by young Wolfgang in his predominant performances at the keyboard, and he's by means no mean prestigious performer. By means no mean prestigious performer. W.A. Mozart, but the likes of Beethoven were coming along as writing sonatas. So where are we? What produces the decline of the Virginal? And the rise of the piano is much explained, isn't it, in batches of battles, really, which England was too far unartistic or devoid of any sense of art during the 17th century. That its battles with the monarchy, who was going to fight under which church or which ruler, what Scotland was going to do for a queen, which had, let's face it, we had the poor death of Mary, Queen of Scots, under the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. You wonder why. You don't have to wonder. Yeah, you don't have to wonder why. That by 1643, the Battle of Rocroi, in the 30 Years' War, we are talking about the Franco-Spanish War of 30 years, from 1635 to 1659, where in the 19th of May, 1643, the Battle of Rocroi was fought under the Duke d'Angers and against the Spanish army under the General Francisco de Melo, only 5 days after the ascension of Louis XIV of France to the throne of France, while England was having such struggles, while England was losing its ability to reign its parliament, by its parliament, the king, that the king since 1625 in King Charles I was in fact losing his ability, in fact as much through any long or short parliaments of the 1630s to in the 1640s find that there was little going to be regained by recalling or being present at any parliamentary debate or, shall we say, reascension other than by 1649 after some battles in England, which included Naseby, to lose one's brains, to lose one's marbles, to lose one's head, even. That by 1650 you would not equate, would you, the provider in Oliver Cromwell of the protection of the Church of England to be any more represented by James I, or equations which were going to produce the affections which, shall we say, might have been expected in Italian Renaissance and Catholicism after long now, the 1650s, long since the death 100 years before, in 1547, of Henry VIII, who had done so much to create a Church of England and isolate England from the state of Rome. That what was going to effectively end the power of the piano in Europe was no doubt going to be some special attribution that was going to not bring by any chance or repatriation the young or the old back from the dead or the mortally wounded or the intentionally intended exile, even though intended by themselves in that of Bull. That by the time we get to 1689, you would have longed, wouldn't you, for instance, the music of Purcell, that you would gloat, wouldn't you, on the Dido and Aeneas, and Dido's lament. And what was Dido lamenting? that ferments itself in the reign of King William of Orange, a Danish prince, to the throne of England, that was going to change monarchy in what was called the Restoration. How can you expect a dynasty to control itself in the Habsburg Empire, the music of Mozart, for much longer than 1725, in a world so changed by Anne, the death of Queen Anne, into the reign of George I from 1717 to 1727, in that it's expiring to the Church again of England, in the culmination of, for instance, the music of the Wesleyans later, and the great reformations which were going to lead not only to those, as I said, in the performance of soloists such as Beethoven and the sonatas, long after Bach of 1685, who was 1750, created 48 preludes and fugues, and the preludes and the 18 little preludes and so forth for the piano, expressively for the piano. That by the time, wasn't it, that the idea that Italy or Austria could hang on to the piano, it was already being attributed or redistributed in its interpretive role by such countries as England, where over the 7 Years' War, for instance, and its industry in the mid-18th century, was going to be creating some strife in the manufacture of pianos, that by John Baldwin and Sons in London and other makers around England, and in Camden Town, for instance, at one stage there were some 600 piano specialists. It is not unusual, is it, to realize that the unsolicited sponsorship of any church that had long since given up the Lutheran, in favor of the Lutheran Church and the Reformation of music and that of Wesley, was going to do anything else than allow for the new kind of music in the piano that was going to see, for instance, even those older piano concertos of W.A. Mozart, one of the last, which was the 19th or the 21, is uncertain, at the coronation of King Leopold II in 1789, at Mainz, where Mozart met Haydn, who was about to leave for England. Haydn, of course, was one of the greatest composers for the string quartet, but whose this Habsburg dynasty, so long passing, was taken away by such as the immigration of Blackhat Judy to work as carpenter for Broadwood, who was going to grow into the firm of Broadwood and Son in the later 1700s. That certainly the Battle of Rocroi ended the Habsburg dynasty on the 19th of May 1643, and effectively English music, as anything was going to be called, was effectively long dead. So you ask yourself, what is a real piano? Well, you want to buy a real piano from a real seller who knows what they are selling, rather than a virginal pile of junk. Welcome. You are not in any sense expected to celebrate necessarily the decisive French victory of the 19th of May at Rocroi, 1643, where the strength of 17,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry, 14 guns, fought against 19,000 of the Francesco de Mello infantry. See what that is, that 30 Years' War. It does not take, does it, 2 world wars to resurrect the piano in Great Britain. No. Thank you for watching.